Have you ever wondered how energy healing actually works, whether it's hypnosis, Reiki? What is it? Well, today I have a guest on the podcast who started out very scientific minded, literally a scientist, and now she does quantum hypnosis healing. So she's bringing her wisdom to the podcast today to talk about how it works, what her journey was and is, and what the heck the quantum field is. I personally have never resonated with the word quantum, and I love how she explains it. She explains it from the science and the spirituality. So get ready to learn the ins and outs of healing. Welcome to Spiritual and Ambitious. I'm your host, Whitney McNeil. I'm a certified medium and spiritual teacher, and I help spiritual and ambitious souls just like you live your life purpose through your career and attract abundance by connecting into your intuition and spirit guides. Let's get spiritual and ambitious. Welcome to another episode of the Spiritual and Ambitious podcast. Today, we are talking about healing, and I have invited a special guest, Deanna Frey, onto the podcast to talk about quantum healing. And Deanna has a master's degree in organic chemistry from Duke University and spent over 25 years in scientific research before totally switching gears and becoming a quantum healing hypnosis practitioner, Reiki master, and Archangelic light master. She helps people heal their spirit, unveil who they are meant to be, and step into the flow of their ideal life. And I love Deanna's background because she really bridges the science-y part with the spiritual part. I think that so many times we have issues with accepting the spiritual part when we have such an analytical mind. And so, I've got to ask Deanna about this. But first, let's welcome her to the podcast. So, hey, Deanna, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, Whitney, it's my pleasure.
So before we dive into the quantum healing hypnosis, let's just talk about, so we met when? We met like years ago. What was it, back when I was in North Carolina?
Yeah, I actually know the exact time because it happened to be Super Bowl Sunday in 2012. You did a reading at my friend's house, a group reading, and that was the first kind of reading I'd ever done before. And so as a scientist, I was super skeptical.
Yeah.
But I will always have an open mind. And when you did that reading in the group, it was really funny. You went to start with me first because I was closest to you. And you went, nope, we're going last. And you get around the other whole way around the circle. And now I know why. Because when I listened to what you did for everyone, what you said with everyone else, I knew it was true and I knew you couldn't know it. And that let my scientific mind go, there's something here.
Isn't that so cool? My husband is very sciencey minded and analytical, and I am too. You and I have talked about, I have a lot of Virgo in my chart, and you're Virgo, and I think that lends itself a little bit more analytical sometimes too. But it's so interesting. I am finding more and more people who have a logical mind and are more scientific are getting into the spiritual part of it. And I'm sure that scientific people have been in the spiritual field for years and years, but I'm just noticing it more and more, which is great. And I think that we're moving into a higher vibration, if you will. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey as to how you found quantum healing hypnosis. And before we even get into that, what is it? Can you tell us what it is? And the abbreviation, right, is QHHT?
Yeah. So QHHT stands for Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And like so many, let me back up. So what it kind of is it's essentially whenever we do any kind of energy healing, including this, we are working with the quantum field, right? And it's like, so what on earth is the quantum field? As a scientist, I'd love to say, oh, quantum field, right? But for everybody else, it's the energy of the universe, right? It's that energy that's in every single thing. And, the other day I came across this really awesome quote from the Dalai Lama that made it so perfectly understandable. He said that all the atoms in your body include part of the ancient canvas that was used to make up the universe. You are stardust, connected biologically to all living creatures. You are made of invisible humming energy connected all at once to everything that exists.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I thought that was just something anyone can understand that, right? And that's exactly what it is. We're working in that space. So when we do anything with quantum healing, whatever form of modality that might take, we are working with that energy. And as a scientist, I love it because everything's energy, right? So
I was going to ask you, like, how does the scientific part or piece kind of connect into that spirituality part of it? So when you, or before you started to look into the healing side of it, would you interpret the definition the same way and from that science mind?
it's interesting because when I first started kind of trying to come to grips with it was kind of like, I was accepting of it, but I'm like, how do I put these two together? And it really was, I'm kind of like, okay, well, step back for a moment. As a scientist, what do you believe? You believe that everything is made up of energy, whether it's a piece of wood or our hand or a molecule. Everything is energy. Well, if that's true, then of course this is going to work because everything's energy. You're just working with energy. So that's kind of how it really freed up my mind to stop trying to contradict myself of like, are you sure? I don't know. And so, it really helped.
That's really helpful, I think, for our listeners who are kind of wondering still, what that is. And that's a beautiful bridge, I think, between the two different perspectives, because really it's the same perspective. It's just the prism of which you're looking from. Tell me a little bit about what QHHT actually is. We talked about the quantum field. It's a technique, but tell me a little bit more juiciness. Like, what is the session? Like, what is that?
It's interesting how spirit works, right? Because I hadn't heard of it a couple of years ago, and somebody sent me a video clip, and I happened to look at it, and then I'm like, well, who is this person? And it was about Dolores Cannon, and I was like, who is this person? And then I went to it, and I read about it, and I was like, oh, that's it. That's it. I want to do it. So what it really is, we or me as a practitioner can induce someone into a trance or a hypnosis. And that level is essentially the same level we get in every day, just before we go to sleep and just before we wake up. We're already automatically in it. And in that state, we can access what we would call our higher self, that part of ourselves that sees and has seen everything. And that's what we're doing in the session. So it gives us a chance to visit a past life and find out all kinds of juicy information. It also gives us a chance to connect and do healing in a way that the higher self does specifically with that person. And then also the really fun part for people and can be just so kind of break them wide open is being able to ask whatever questions they want. So what do you want what do you want to know from your higher self?
It's that place of almost what comes up for me is like pure source point or that stillness, that place where we can access all the answers. So I have another question because our listeners might say, well, what do you mean by healing? Sometimes we think of healing as, we're going to the doctor and we're getting healing, or we know sometimes about Reiki healing, but tell me a little bit more about, what kind of healing can take place in a session like this.
I see so many different kinds, and it really just depends on what's happening for the person. So the higher self will bring down energy. It'll bring down light if it's a physical issue. I've seen it do kind of, according to what it's saying it's doing, as kind of doing some kind of surgery. If it's something that's emotional, it may be helping to release ties to something. It just really depends on what it is. And it does it through, so I can't see it, unfortunately, but the person experiencing it can see it. And so they talk to me and I kind of experience it that way. So it's all kinds of healing from physical to emotional. Usually, in a way, it's kind of like an energy healing session, right? Because you're still working with all that energy, that quantum field.
Do people usually come into a session with a certain intention? Like, I want to experience past life, or I want to remove a block. And is that what you mean by surgery? I'm going to put surgery in air quotes, like an energetic blockage removal.
Yes, exactly. So every QHHT session automatically has a past life in it or some kind of life regression in it. That's part of the process. Now, I do have people think about what their intention is. And sometimes they will know what it is. Sometimes your higher self always knows, right? Even if
Yeah.
you don't state it. But yeah, I have them come in and I ask them, what things do you need healing with? Are there mental, emotional, physical things that you would like help with? And then I ask them to bring a list of questions. And these can be like metaphysical questions. It can be, what's my life purpose? Where have I incarnated? I mean, there can be all kinds of things. It's really cool.
And so they're getting the answers for themselves, right? You're just kind
Yes.
of guiding them. That's really
Yep.
neat. I
All I'm
love
doing
that.
is the facilitator. I'm just asking.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? Whenever I used to do past life regressions or Reiki sessions, sometimes my spirit guides would come through. It was almost like they were telling me, just get out of the way. We're going to do whatever, or this person needs to do whatever. And, sometimes I feel like we just really are holding the container, holding the space. And I think every session can be so different. But let's back up. How did you even hear about this? Because honestly, I hadn't heard about this until you started taking my programs and aligned and spiritual business and learning more about what you do. I was like, what is this? I wanted to learn together with our listeners here
Yeah, sure.
today, because I know that you've gotten such great results with your clients and I know how passionate you are about it. So I'm going to back up and ask you, how did you even find out about this? And how did you decide, like, this is what I want to do?
What's really interesting about it is I was having some weird physical symptoms.
Oh,
Some things, and as the scientist, I was working I came from pharma, so I knew a little bit about kind of things. And I had somebody said, "Hey, did you see this video from Dolores Cannon?" She was talking about one of her books, The Three Waves of Volunteers. And she was discussing some symptoms that she saw her clients who had done QHHT have. And I was like, wait, that sounds really familiar. So then I was like, wait a minute, who is this Dolores Cannon person? How does she know anything about it? And then I went to her webpage and looked at QHHT. Now, when I did that, the first thing it said was a session is past life regression. I was like, ooh, ever since I'd heard about Brian Weiss, I was like, I want to learn how to do that. I've been wanting to do that forever. And because I was already healing, I was like, you mean somebody can come to one session and get a healing and they don't have to keep coming back? I'm like, that is powerful. I didn't even get to the question higher self part. I was already in with the first two. And so it just started the pandemic. Everything closed down. I was like, I can't do my business in person right now. I'm going to take this class. And I always know when spirit is supporting me, because as part of my certification, I had to do 25 sessions during
wow.
the pandemic when we were locked down. These are all in-person sessions. I did them in 2.5 months.
Wow. That's awesome.
So, I mean, spirit wanted me to do it. And I felt this incredible pull to do it. It just felt like this is it. And it's been like that since then. And no, I've done a huge number of sessions, like over 130 or more in the last couple of years. So I know that I'm being brought people that need this.
So, two things I want to ask and
Mm-hmm.
clarify, because so many people will ask me, we'll get questions in the inbox. Do you teach Reiki, or how do I know which healing modality to go with? So I just want to ask you, when you had your experience, was it just a knowing, like, ooh, and you felt like a full body, yes, that I want to take this?
Yeah, it really was. I was like, looked at it and was like, oh, that's so exciting. And then as I was doing it, it was kind of like that feeling you get in your body, right? That's kind of that little rush of like, what if I could do this?
Yeah.
No, I couldn't possibly. What if?
Right.
And it just got super excited. I'm like, I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to do it.
I love that. And what I noticed, for those of you who are not seeing us on video, by the way, you can watch this over on YouTube. But Deanna, when she was saying, ooh, she moved her body physically towards the camera. And Deanna, I know from working with you, you have a lot of channeler energy in you, right? So
Yeah.
claircognizant. And that's one of the ways too that we can really tell, like, yes, this is for me, or no, it's not for me. I was just talking to somebody today about this. So I wanted to point this out. This is a really good place to have that conversation. But I also wanted to say what magic and almost like miracles, we can say, that spirit can make when we're on our path and we're aligned. Because you were there in the pandemic, you're like, what am I going to do? So tell me just a little bit about, how did all these sessions come to you when you're like, how's this going to happen? Like, just tell us a little bit about that. It's always fun to have that inspiration.
Yeah. So I took the class and I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, and my Virgo-ness is always very nervous about anything anyway. And I was like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can step out and admit I do any of this. But I already had a client email from my business, from the energy healing that I had already been doing. And so I was like, well, I'm just going to try. And so I sent out an email to my clients and my newsletter. And I said, look, I've got these sessions. I'm offering them because we do, when you're certifying, they're free. And I'm like, this is what it is. I'm offering it for free if you're interested. And I had more people than I could, they all came so quickly. And even, like I said, even during the pandemic. So.
Yeah, that's amazing. I know we have listeners who are spiritual business owners and they might be saying, how am I going to get more clients? What do I need to do? And so I think just really talking to your audience is so helpful. And sometimes we do feel called to offer things for free. In your specific situation, it was more of part of your certification. But even if you're a business owner out there and you've been charging for a while, sometimes we just want to do something, we feel called to do it, and it can give us a little bit more exposure in that place too. So I want to ask you one more question before we get to our break. What kind of results have you seen, and what kind of results have you had in your own life with this?
I think the biggest things I've seen is perspective changing. And it's really interesting because people have come from all kinds of things. I have worked with military folks because we're not far from we have a lot of stations on the East Coast from us. I've seen husband and wives who are trying to work on their marriage. You wouldn't think this would be a marriage thing to work through, right? And yet it was. And so it's really about having them experience things and see life from a different perspective and really understand what the choices they're making or the choices they have made or what they can do. And then I see big changes.
Yeah. So big changes like career change.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I had one person say, you won't believe what happened to me. Like within the last 2 months, I sold my house and bought a house near my wife, my daughter, my job totally changed. And I have a brand new boyfriend who treats me like I'm a princess. I was like, okay.
I know. I remember when I would do a past life session, there was some stories that are really fun like that. And I had a client who was having some marital issues. And in the past life, she saw who her husband was in a past life and removed cords. And then she messaged me the next day and said, something changed after that session. All of a sudden, he's acting differently. And it wasn't the intention. It was like this wonderful side effect. And the reason I bring this up is because I think that healing is so profound. It comes in so many different ways. And I don't do sessions anymore, but you do. So I love to highlight how this can be so helpful for everyone. So I've got some more questions for you, Deanna, but before we get to them, let's just go ahead and take a quick break and we'll be right back. As a professional psychic medium, I've done tens of thousands of readings, but I felt a call to move more fully into teaching intuition. But I still get so many requests about doing readings. So while I don't do readings anymore, I have brought in some very trusted colleagues who are now available for live 1-hour readings on Zoom. If you would like to book your psychic medium reading, go to messengerofspirit.com/appointments to see our available readers and schedule your Zoom reading today. All right. Thanks for hanging in there with us through the break. I'm here with Deanna Frey, and we're talking about quantum healing hypnosis technique. I said that finally. Like I was making sure I said it correctly. And we're talking about the results that we see with energy healing. But would you mind sharing with us how it's affected your life, like in your way? Because I'm so fascinated with the scientific approach to spirituality that you've really bridged, and now you kind of live in both worlds. So
it's interesting.
Yeah.
My husband is also, he's an engineer. So, we're all kind of very working in that space. And so what I have seen for me is certainly over the course of the last 7 years specifically that I've been doing the business, especially, my life has changed in so many ways. Like I'm just generally happier. The household is generally happier. the things that we are achieving in the household. Like my husband has gotten great things at work, right? And it's interesting. I've come out of my shell a little bit more. I'm not so hesitant in a mixed audience of all his colleagues that are science, or even my old science colleagues before, to be able to go, yeah, I do energy healing. And I mean, I may not get to all the specifics,
Right.
but yeah, it's made a difference of how open I am. But I have just really seen our life just improve in general across so many ways, from health to mental well-being to just kind of our abundance and prosperity and kind of general joy and happiness with life.
So I have a couple questions. One is, you have been talking about we. So does your husband get sessions from you or get these sessions too?
You know what's really interesting? He doesn't, although he was my very first QHHT person. He willingly did that. No, but he's learned so much. So I never, ever pushed anything on him. I just quietly went about my business, but it's kind of worn off on him to the point now where he will say things like, oh, yes, we should ask the team, kind of things like that. So he'll agree. Will he do it himself? Maybe, maybe not. Or sometimes he'll say, you know, I really hurt my knee. I could probably use some Reiki. And I'm like, okay.
That's nice. So my next question leads into, because you said can other people's lives be affected even if they don't get the session, but you are? Like, how does that work? Because I know that some listeners are like, wait a minute, he's not getting those sessions. So like, how is his stuff at work improving and with this?
Perfect question. You know, that's why we started this all with talking about the quantum field, right? Everything is energy. Everything's connected. We are all connected in some way, right? And so when I raise my energy, when I elevate my energy, it comes out all around me. Even my pets pick it up on sometimes. Like if they want something, boy, they'll attach right next to you. So think about it. If you go out into the world, if you go to the grocery store someplace else and you smile at somebody, what happens? Even if they're kind of grumpy, a lot of times they'll smile back. And you may have changed their day, right? With something really simple. So it's the same kind of thing here. I live this way. I give off that energy because my energy has risen up. And so he gets the benefit. Everybody around me gets the benefit of that.
I love that. It's like vibration, especially when you live with someone and you're with them day in and day out. The higher you can raise your vibration, it also affects the people around you. I do definitely believe that. And I love your explanation for it. So who, though, should consider getting a session? Like, I know that somebody can feel a call and be like, I got to get this session. You know, I listened to this podcast. But who should and why should they consider getting a session?
It's really funny. Dolores Cannon's daughter, Julia, said, everybody should get a session. And
Right?
honestly,
Yeah.
in some respects, I agree, because it's about getting information to help you with your life, right? So really, I think people feel the calling to do this when they're at a place where they're like, I'm not sure what I want to do next. I feel kind of stuck, or I'm not really sure. That kind of stuff. This is a perfect way to kind of help you bridge to the next phase, right? And we talked a little bit about science people. I see a lot of logical people kind of coming out of the woodwork now. I'm one of them, finally coming out, and they're kind of a little lost, a little skeptical. They're not sure where to go. And so this was a wonderful way for them to kind of touch in.
Okay, couple questions too. Now I've got all these questions, so I'm like, One is, how does this differ from Reiki?
Well, because it's so Reiki is really just, when I'm doing Reiki, I'm just channeling the energy. So again, I'm not giving anything, I'm channeling it, right? But the energy is going down and it's doing whatever it's going to do because it's a smart energy. It's going to do the healing it needs. When we're doing this other thing, I am literally calling on your specific higher self. The higher self may use a Reiki type energy to do healing, but it's so much more. You're calling on the consciousness. You're calling on the wisdom. So you're getting all that knowledge and things too, not just the wonderful healing.
And it's hypnosis, right? So it's going into that hypnotic type of state. So what could somebody kind of expect going into a session? Because I think that's one of the fears. They might say, you know, I really want a session, but oh my gosh, what is this person going to be doing? Are they going to be chanting? Are they going to be playing music? You know, they get anxious because they don't know what to expect. So kind of, what does it look like? Because what if somebody says, well, you can't hypnotize me? I'm sure you probably hear that.
Oh, yeah. And I'm one of those people. I was one of those people like, oh no, I don't get hypnotized. Because one, I didn't know what it was. Because think about how many times we look at it at television, we see somebody doing the watch,
Yes.
we're like, oh, look. And then the person talks like a chicken or whatever. It's not like that at all. So when I said that you get into this level, like at least twice a day when you're going to sleep and waking up, you get into a kind of trance. If you've ever been driving and you're driving and you get someplace and you're like, I mean, you get there perfectly safe, but it's kind of like, wow, I don't remember the last 10 minutes, right? But here I am, I'm here, right? That's a level of, it's a little bit lighter than what we get here.
Yeah.
But it's the same idea. So the other thing I always tell people who are a little concerned is you are never going to be able to be led anywhere, right? Your higher self is the one guiding you. So you're going to do what you want to do. I'm never going to be able to tell you you're going to do this thing. You can't, right? I can't do that. You always have free will. And so you will have free will here. So it really is about me when we do a session, I spend time talking to somebody first so that we get real comfortable with each other's energy. So that's part of it, like getting comfortable and feeling good. And then I just literally, it's like doing a guided meditation. It's really following a guided meditation for about 15 minutes and really allowing your imagination to flow with it, getting into that right side of your brain and letting it happen. And then it just flows from there.
Yeah. So do people fall asleep? Got to ask that question.
I've had one or two people fall asleep. Usually not very long though. Usually it's just kind of, I call them back.
Okay, good.
Because it is just about that level. It's that level of trance just before you fall asleep, right? So I'm kind of calling them back and they're talking the whole time. So once we start it, I'm asking them questions and they have to talk.
Yeah,
so,
I gotcha.
I do wanted to share one quick thing with you, Whitney, that I thought that you'll really appreciate because it reminds me of sleep. So when I did my session, I had a Fitbit on. Later after the session, I went back a couple days later and downloaded my Fitbit. My Fitbit does sleep.
Yeah.
When I downloaded it, it showed that I had taken a 3-hour nap one day. And I was like, no, I didn't. And it literally you can tell exactly the timing when I went into hypnosis. It was a straight line. I mean, didn't even do the normal things that you see in sleep. It was like a straight line all the way across.
Wow.
It was so
that
cool.
Is so neat.
So for me, the really scientist, it was like, ooh, look at that, right?
I love it. You've got real data that you can compare to that, which I think is really beautiful. So it's like the spiritual and the science are coming together for it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how I know my team come in and said, we're going to show you these things so that you can share these things, right? We know you need to see them, but you're going to have people that need to see it too. And it has helped, certainly.
Absolutely. And I feel like, everybody has to kind of experience things for themselves to really find what that is for them too, which I think is always really important. So I do have a couple more questions for you before we break. Can this be done online, like distance, or does it have to be in person?
So QHHT, as done by Dolores, the Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique as taught by Dolores, is only an in-person thing. I do another form of quantum healing, which has a slightly lesser trance that can be done online. And we do it via Zoom.
Nice. And so what is that specifically called?
Yes, that's called Beyond Quantum Healing. It has quantum healing in it, but the Beyond Quantum Healing is the one that you can do online.
Okay. So this is great because we have listeners in all different countries. And so this is a great way to still be able to get that session. And Deanna actually has a free gift for you if you're listening. She has a free 30-minute consultation. And you can get that at blueskiesjourney.com/consultation. I'm going to link to that in the show notes because you spell her website a little differently. So I want to make sure that you've got the right link. And I do have a last question for you, Deanna. For anyone out there who's just really trying to analyze all this and really trying to come to their own definition of spirituality and they're in their own awakening, do you have any words of wisdom for them that you feel like you're called to share?
I think the biggest thing that worked for me to help me get through all of this is allowing me to say, what if? So when I saw something that was unusual, say, if this were true, who would it hurt? What if I just allowed it to happen and see what happens? As a scientist, I'm like, I want to see it or see what happens. And so it's kind of like, I just kind of gave it a chance and said, if I believe this, what's it going to hurt? Who is it going to hurt? What's it going to do? Nobody. So let's see what happens and let it go.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that when we start asking ourselves, what if, so many doors open for us, and we take spirit up on the opportunities that they create for us as well. And you've created a beautiful opportunity for everybody to get a 30-minute free consultation with you, which I think is amazing. So I hope you take Deanna up on this. And I know some people are going to say, well, but is the BQH, like the Beyond Quantum Healing, going to provide the same results as the quantum healing? And I'll ask you your opinion, but what I want to share is people would say that about distant Reiki. And I would have some skeptics doing distant Reiki, and they would say, oh my gosh, I felt things. And there was one time where I had a client who missed her appointment. As far as what I would do is I'd jump on a call with them, or I'd just kind of send them an email and let them know the session started, even though we scheduled a time. And so I just did the session, felt her higher self. Yes. Afterwards, she said, I got mixed up. But what was interesting is I got into this trance. I got into this place where I was having this conversation with my daughter, and I got really, really relaxed. And I thought, oh, I think I missed my session, and it's happening right now. Like, she didn't miss anything because it was distance anyway, but she kind of forgot it was happening. So tell me a little bit, like, what kind of differences do you see, if any at all?
The differences between the two is, for those people, if you can do an in-person session, then I recommend doing it, especially if you're super analytical, because then I'm right there with my energy to kind of help you get through. But otherwise, they're very, very much the same. They're a little bit different. It's a slightly different trance. I would say, if I were comparing the two, if you already do meditation, or you're already kind of a little bit of spiritual based, or you're willing to just be open, then Beyond Quantum Healing is just as good. You get the same benefits. The hypnosis part is a slightly different, but the actual parts are the same. Same idea, same past life regression, same healing things, same questions. All that's the same. It's just the little difference of how we get there. That's basically the difference.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Deanna. And thank you so much for being here and chatting about what you do. I know you're helping so many people. So I'll put your link to your free consultation in the show notes. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was wonderful.
All right. This has been a wonderful chat with Deanna, and I will be back next week with a brand new episode. But until then, here's to staying spiritual and ambitious. Thanks so much for listening to this episode. And if you loved it, would you please share it with a friend? I would also love your review and a reminder to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find me at messengerofspirit.com, and you can take the 4 Intuitive Languages quiz and find show notes there too. If you want to connect on YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, you can find me at Messenger of Spirit. I'll meet you right here next week. Here's to staying spiritual and ambitious.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM. Women's voices amplified.